Hey, it's Jordan here in Seattle. I'm at The Cut, which is a viral video company doing great stuff. I'm here with Day, and you're both with The Cut, but you're also one of the leading activists, organizers here.
Yeah.
And I've only been here for a few days, but honestly, I like to look at cities kind of like the tale of two cities. So it was really striking to me last night because I had left my ID in the hotel. So I went back to the hotel to get my ID and meet my coworkers for dinner, and you just see homeless person after homeless person lying on the street in the real gentrified downtown area of Seattle, and everybody's just like passing by like it's just a way of life, normal. So you see that really kind of that cognitive dissonance that goes on in a lot of cities. Sure. But in Seattle, the homelessness epidemic, it's
so would you
crazy
say,
here.
You know, somebody who travels a lot, would you say like it's a stark difference than other major cities?
Well, I live in New York City, so I see that in New York City all the time. But definitely, so far, it seems like it's a little bit more because there's so many less people in Seattle than New York City. So it's more prevalent.
I only ask because I think sometimes I can feel desensitized, and it's like, I know it's bad here, and it never not feels bad. But it's always, I always hear people who travel from other cities saying like, whoa, like what's going on in Seattle, what's going on in Portland, a lot of these major blue West Coast cities, including Hawaii actually, where I'm from, that are facing this. You know, Hawaii, not that much different. You know, I recently passing this no tenting on beach ban, no sidewalks. And you're having homeless people going up into mountains now, literal mountains. Like it sounds like urban legends, but it's like you're going on a hike and you see off trail, like there are tents popping up now.
Yeah.
Obviously pretty dangerous.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like, you know, this is my first time in Seattle, so my impression of Seattle.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. My impression of Seattle was kind of like a little of that flavor from San Francisco, like. Seattle used to be kind of counterculture from what I understand, but with the advent of Amazon and a lot of the tech boom here, it's kind of become, through the economic development, which is a great buzzword that we hear in a lot of cities, the economic development has really helped people making six figures, but really driven out what was the working class, and now you see the working poor, because a lot of these homeless people actually work. And also a lot of the homeless population here is either have some college or a college degree. So can you kind of talk about, some folks we interviewed yesterday really didn't want to get into like Amazon, but I think it's...
Who didn't want to get into Amazon?
Let's just say some governmental people we spoke to, which is not surprising. But I mean, that's the elephant in the room. Well, I mean, the homeless epidemic here has come from places like Amazon driving up the costs. And you have Bernie is the only candidate I'm really hearing about talking about gentrification in his speeches. But who is Amazon helping in Seattle is the question.
You know, Amazon just announced that they're not building their new building in Seattle. So I'm sure a lot of elected officials are a little nervous right now. And you see the fight for the head tax.
Can you tell the audience about that if they don't know?
Just brief overview. Head tax was supposed to tax the top 1% of businesses in Seattle. And so, you know, you have corporations like Amazon, you have corporations like, you know, other big corporations. We are home to a lot of these multi-billion-dollar corporations because there's no income tax here. And so when this tax got shut down, by the business class, they were able to put out a message where it was going to hurt businesses across the board, which was not true. And so they were able to get the middle class, or whatever's left of it, if that's even a real thing, but even like mom and pop shops to like sign on to this, like don't tax away jobs. The same rhetoric that was being played out when we're fighting for $15 minimum wage. Obviously, since we passed $15 minimum wage, we've seen the highest increase of jobs in Seattle. So their fear mongering what didn't play out to be true. But the same kind of the tactic played out, you know, led by corporations like Amazon. And yeah, it's you saw that residual effect happen, in my opinion, in New York. You know, I believe that the fight, even though technically we lost here, was able to empower, and you know, New York is a different, you're from New York, you know, that's there's union strength there that Seattle will never have, and that's reality. But at the same time, I believe we flew council members here who, from what they're saying, learned their lesson on what happened with the fight here for the head tax, and now New York has decided to pull out. Am I right?
Yep. Yeah. Even though Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo has basically been twisting himself into a human pretzel, sending Jeff Bezos roses, and breakfast in bed to try and get him to change his mind.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me because, like, Fight for 15, for example, in Washington State and Seattle is, like you said, the fear-mongering has not come to fruition. But what is the $15 minimum wage? Is that really helpful if prices, if housing and rent go up 70% in 5 years? I mean, 70% it's gone up. So obviously $15 an hour is a huge accomplishment.
Sure.
It would be closer to 20 with inflation and everything if we followed productivity, but I mean, how do people live here even if they are making $15 an hour?
I mean, it's true. 15 is not enough. It's the prices have gone up to a point where you have a neighborhood like the Central District where just a little over a decade ago was about over 60% black people living there, and now Seattle as a whole has 0.8% black people in Seattle left. The numbers are insane, and so you see these inflation numbers going up. You see what Amazon is doing to the city, and then you push Bezos, you push those execs there a little bit, and what do? They buy a homeless shelter. So now they own technically a shelter called Mary's Place, and that's what Seattle, the elected officials, our mayor Jenny Durkin, they do too. They try to repair their PR because they know the public perception now. About what corporate America is doing to cities like Seattle. And so they buy these homeless shelters, but they don't invest in affordable housing. And so you buy these shelters, you create these temporary solutions, and you create this facade of like, we're doing something. But then you do some research on Mary's Place and you realize that this past week they turned down a handful of pregnant women because in their minds they're on some kind of substance. And so there are barriers to these shelters. There's no transitional tactics to help them go back into the community. But what you can do is pass out pamphlets and say, like, look at what we're doing, look at Mary's Place, we care about homeless people. But very strategically and intentionally not invest in any long-term solution.
So it's kind of like the equivalent of an arsonist who's trying to get insurance money, burning down a row of houses and then putting like a few trailers up for the people displaced.
It's what their mind, they think that since they're doing that, they don't have to be accountable to the long-term effect they've already done to this city. And in a lot of ways, I hesitate saying this because one of the things I've really appreciated seeing over the past couple of years is people who are from this city, from this neighborhood, advocating to at least preserve what's left of Seattle. And me not being from here, I don't want to say Seattle's a lost cause, but in a lot of ways, it's going to be really hard to get out of this current situation where a lot of community members feel like they're drowning.
And I also want to reference, we spoke with John Burbank yesterday of the Economic Opportunity Institute, and he said Seattle's basically in a fiscal crisis. So budgetary-wise, because you have no income tax, there's not enough revenue coming in. There's been all these subsidies to Amazon, Boeing, other companies. So there's not enough revenue to pay for the homelessness, affordable housing, programs for the vulnerable. And there's more need of programs for the vulnerable because Amazon is displacing people. So it's like kind of this twisted dystopia where like, oh, look at the development and the bars and the restaurants and the shopping district and Jeff Bezos' balls up there. Not Jeff Bezos' bottom parts. They have two Amazon balls here. It's called Bezos' balls, they call it. But it really, it's striking because this is kind of what you hear on CNN and other places about the booming economy. But it's not just Seattle. I mean, you see development in downtown regions in Chicago. The Riverwalk is beautiful. I've taken a stroll there, but the rest of Chicago is rotting. San Francisco, Portland, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Philadelphia, I could go on. So it's like, who is the economy booming for? Because native Seattle people, there's not a lot left of them. But also, I mean, the numbers, this is from a Guardian article, but you have I think a couple years ago, from 2011 to 2017, it's gone from 1,300 public school kids were homeless to now like over 4,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
And about 300 youth shelter beds. So, you know, I just got through saying that homeless shelters are just a temporary solution, but even within that, if you're having under 500 youth shelter beds with 4,000 homeless kids, where are the rest going? Mm-hmm. You know, and these encampments are set up all across the city. According to city policy, the city just has to let an encampment know 48 hours in advance that they're gonna come and destroy and sweep the encampment. And so you have 2 days essentially to figure out where you're gonna move literally your whole life, because your whole life is in the encampment. And you're averaging about 4 to 5 sweeps a week, year round. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they ramp up, depends. When the Mariners are preparing for their opening day, you're gonna have more sweeps happening near the Soto area where the Mariners play. Mm-hmm. And so it's a crisis that doesn't look like it's getting better. Our former mayor declared a state of emergency over 1,300 days ago on homelessness, and we've only seen the problem getting worse. And whoever you're talking to declaring that Seattle's in a fiscal crisis, yet we're still unwilling to tax the rich here, just blows my mind.
And it's also, I mean, Amazon's $1 trillion company, so this employer tax that was proposed, I think it would have been like, what did they would have been taxed like 240?
It would have been less than a fourth of what he makes on Black Friday.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been nothing to Bezos. It was, and that's what I believe.
And sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
he has in the past personally dumped I think 100,000 in to stop a wealth tax that was proposed in Seattle.
Oh yeah, definitely. And for a lot of people who are on the ground pushing for this head tax, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but the amount of money that would have came out of this tax would not have made a huge, significant impact on, what do I want to say, erasing the homelessness crisis. At the same time, it would not have made a big dent in the pockets of Jeff Bezos and people like him. But for both sides, it was a battle of principle. It was a battle that we knew if it was gonna fail, we didn't know what the hell we're gonna do moving forward from that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And for Bezos too, it's not like Bezos was up at night like thinking I'm gonna lose this money and I'm fucked, and like he wouldn't even have noticed that. But for both sides, it was like, okay, where are our elected officials in this city gonna stand? And if they pass this head tax, what else are they gonna do to impact the wealth of the top 1%? And for us activists, what else are they gonna do to continue to help make an impact on this homelessness crisis? And when the head tax failed, people on the ground, that was one of the most depleting days, at least for me as an advocate for homelessness. And again, it wasn't because I thought like if we pass this head tax, this crisis would be solved. It was because the true colors were shown. Elected officials, at the end of the day, were gonna side with the top 1%. And we are officially blocking any kind of tax, at least on the city level.
Right.
To try to keep these really, really rich people accountable.
Out front tonight, chaos at the White House. President Trump's deputy chief of staff, his communications director, is
just because of their connection to President Trump. And I know you've been saying...
We learned recently that Donald Trump threatened to sue his former schools if...
Tired of hearing about Trump 24/7? Become a member at statuscool.com for only $10 a month. Click the notification. With your help, we can start the media revolution.
And before Bernie went on stage, I spoke with his supporters online here, and you really get that feeling from